Okay, I think we are good to start now. Good afternoon again. My name is Jayabani and I will be your instructor for this particular session. Right? So let me share my screen. We can start now. I hope you can see me and my screen. Can I get quick confirmation, guys? If you can see me and you can see my screen. Yes, faculties. Screen is not visible. Okay, Parth sir, it is visible for others. So there might be some network issue, maybe, right? So you can just rejoin the call and probably that will solve this issue. Fine. All right. Thank you all for your responses. Okay, so in the morning session, we were discussing about HTML, right? And in HTML, we saw some elements, right? Some commonly used elements along with some media elements, right? List elements. So one topic was remaining there, and that is forms, right? So let's just cover forms first, and then we can start with CSS, right? There are so many things to learn. So let's just get started without further ado. So forms, right? So what is the use of forms? Anyone? Why we should use HTML forms? Yes. Anyone? All right, all right. It's visible now for Patsar as well. Okay, so HTML forms to get input from user. Yes, that is absolutely correct. To gather information to get user input, right? Now, why should we get user input? Why we are gathering the data? To perform some operation on that, right? To collect some information or to send that information to server, right? We want some operation to happen on that particular information. So basically what we do, we just collect it from user, right? With the help of HTML forms, and then we just send it to the server. Right. So if you have heard that whenever we initiate any HTTP request, then what happens? What exactly we send to server? We send request headers, right? We send request headers, and along with request header, we also send request body, right? Now, what body contains? Body contains the data that we will be getting from HTML forms, right? Whatever data we get, we send it to server with the help of request body, right? So let's just create the HTML form, right? And let's see how it is created. Okay. HTML form, there are basically three elements that we can explore. One is input, second is text area, and third is select option, right? So let's see all of three one by one, right? So for that, what I will do, I'll just create one HTML file, right? So you can see forms.html is already created. I'll just open that. I already created some of the files, right? To save some time. All files are empty. We are going to write code from scratch, right? So I already have HTML forms file, right? And here I'll just first write my boilerplate code, right? And if you're wondering how I created this template, so in VS Code, you don't need to do anything externally. You can directly press Shift 1. That is your exclamation mark, and you can just hit enter. VS Code has built-in support of Emmet, right? So using Emmet, you can generate HTML boilerplate code. Right? Remember in morning session, we were able to write something like lorem 12. So it generated a paragraph of 12 words, 12 dummy words, right? So that is again because of Emmet, that comes built in with VS Code. Okay, fine. So let's write the body, right? This is where our content of website will be, right? So title, I can change it to maybe registration form, something like this, right? Now, in the body, what I want to create, I want to create HTML form, right? So for that, we have one tag called form tag. So let's write form tag. And here you can see action attribute is also mentioned, but as of now, it is not required, right? We'll use this in the backend session, right? Maybe tomorrow, day after tomorrow, but right now it is not needed. What it do basically? So the data that you are collecting, where you want to send the data, right? Where you want to send the data in the server. So that URL, your backend path, you are going to mention in this action attribute, right? But right now we are just focusing on front end. So let's not use that, right? So we got rid of it. And now in this form, I hope the font size is visible. Let me increase it much. Sorry. Okay. So in this form, which are the three primary elements? Input, text area, and select, right? So let's start with input first. So I'll write input, and there are multiple types in the input. For example, you want to take name from the user. So what you can write name and then input type text. Okay. Let's say I want to get email from user. So what I can use? You can use input type email. Right? Again, there are some extra attributes which are generated by VS Code because I'm using auto completion. So you can get rid of that if you don't want. Right? We'll learn what those attributes are. Name attribute, ID attribute. We'll learn them in today's session only. Don't worry. But right now, let's get rid of that. Okay. And let's say if you want to take password. So you have one input type called password as well. Right? So input colon password. This is just again, see, we are using Emmet. Can you see this Emmet abbreviation? So there are so many shortcuts that you can use, right? Using Emmet. So I'm not writing entire tag. Can you see me writing like this? No, right? What I am doing, I'm just writing input, enter. So it will create input tag with type text, but I don't want text tag. So what I can do, I can write input colon, and then what type I want? I want password. So I will write input colon password. Fine. So with practice, you'll remember these commonly used shortcuts, right? But that is not the point of discussion. The point of discussion is how we can create HTML form, right? Now, let's see the output. Okay, so for output, what we can do, we can directly open this HTML file in our browser, right? But there is actually a better way to run this file on browser. We can use one extension called live server. How to get live server extension? So see, in your VS Code, on the left panel, you can see one extension tab. Just click on extensions and just search for live server. I'll show you the advantage of this. Can you see this live server extension? You can install it. Right now, I can see uninstall option because it is already installed with my system, with my VS Code, right? But for you, if you have not already installed, you will see install button. Okay, it will take just 10 to 20 seconds. It's a very small file, right? So just install it. And one important thing, once you install this particular extensions, just restart your VS Code IDE. Restart your editor, right? Restart means just close it and open it again. Fine. Because then only you will be able to use this extension. Or for any extension, it's always a good practice to restart VS Code once you install any new extension, right? Fine. So once your extension is installed, then if you right click on a HTML file, you will see one option. See, third last option, you can see open with live server. Can you see this open with live server? That is because we installed this extension. Right? Let's click on that. And you can see my HTML form is open now in my browser. But what is the advantage of this extension? See, if I make any changes, for example, if I write something like fill up this form, right? I wrote this. That means I made some changes into my website, right? Now, when I save this, see what happens. When I save this, I just saved it. Okay. And you can see the changes are automatically reflected in my website, right? So how convenient it is, because otherwise you every time need to refresh this page to see your changes. But with this extension, it is always running, right? It is already running. So if you want to close it, of course you can close it. Right click and you can click on stop live server. But until the server is open, live server is open, all changes will get reflected automatically. Right? And it does not take time. It's just a matter of fraction of seconds. Fine. Okay. So what I will do first, let me put this. And let's open everything side by side, right? It will be easy to understand now. Okay, let's get rid of this. And yes, you can see here user can enter their name, their email, right? Something like this. He can mention his password, something like this. And you can see the browser is also handling this as a password. See, we are not able to see the text that we are writing. And this is also email. If you do not try to valid email here, the form will not get accepted. Right? So make sure that if you are taking past email, use type email instead of text. If you write text, other then browser will handle it like text only. Right? Now to make it look bit clear, what I will do, I'll just write some BR here, so that we get everything in new line. But again, using BR is not a good practice, right? Because we have CSS for the same thing, right? This is part of styling, laying out the things. So we should not use tags like BR. But for now, we don't know CSS yet, right? So let's use them. Now, the form is created, right? A very small form is created. Now, how to submit this form? Now the next question is how to submit this form. So again, you can use one input, but this time type will be submit. And see, submit button is created. As soon as I save the changes, save the file, the changes are reflecting. Right? That is why I always encourage all of you to use this particular extension. Right? Okay, fine. You can also use one input with type reset. So what happens is, let's say user has put in some information here and he want to reset the form. He mentioned all his information incorrectly and now he want to reset this. So what you can do, you can just click on reset and see everything is gone now, right? There are so many input type. We saw 5 types. There are so many. If you want to take number, you can just use number, right? If you want to take date, so for that also you have, right? See here, you can type in only number. If I'm trying to write text, I'm not able to do, right? Just E is possible because it can represent a value, right? 10 raised to power something. So that is possible, but rest any letter is not possible. Fine. And here for the date, you can see now I got the date field, right? I can choose any date that I want. See how easy it is. We just used one input tag, nothing else, right? So these are some of the commonly used input, right? Fine. Now after input, what else we can use? We can use text area and select. So let's first use text area. So I just want to write uh, a message, something like mm, about yourself. Okay, about yourself. Right? And here, let's write the text area, right? And you can see text area is created. Let me make it look a bit better. So I'm just adding some DRs, nothing else. Okay. So see here, for text area, again, this name attribute, you can skip it for now. Now there are two other attributes. One is columns and second is rows, right? One is column and second is rows. You can change it if you want. If I make the column 50, you can see the width is increased. But again, you can adjust the size directly from UI. So that is not much of use, but yes, you can. You can specify some default columns and rows. Fine. So this was text area. User can write about himself or herself, right? My name is something like this. My name is Jay and so on. Fine. Now, after text area, one element is select. One tag is select. Now, before select, I also want to introduce radio buttons, right? Because that are quite useful. Again, radio is type of input only. So let's just use radio. Okay. So let's say you want to get gender of user. So what you will write? You will write gender. Okay. And the first option that you would like to give is male, right? So for male, let's write input and let's write radio here. Okay. And let's now write for female because there are three options, right? Male, female, and others. So let's write three inputs. Again, type will be radio and others. Again, input type will be radio. Let me get rid of these two attributes now. And let me also add some BR here. Yes, so you can clearly see now I have three radio buttons, male, female, and other. But there is one issue here. Well, what can be the issue, anyone? Getting any idea what can be the issue here? Yes. Yes, attendance will be shared in some time, right? Please wait. We are going to share it in some time. See, the issue here is I can check all three radio. See, is it possible? Is it ideal to do? No, we should be able to select only one option, either male, either female, or other, right? So that is one challenge here. So for that, what we are going to do, we will write a name attribute here. So name gender. And the name gender, I will write in all three radio buttons. See here, for all three, I'll be writing name gender. Let's now try. I selected male. Okay, no issues. If I try to select female, now I cannot. And if I try to select other, all the other options are removed. Right? Name attribute. But the thing here is for all radio buttons, the name attribute value must be same. Right? So in your entire HTML form, whatever radio button have this name gender, that will be included in that particular field, right? So for gender, we have three radio buttons, and for all three radio buttons, the name must be same, right? But what is the use of name attribute? Here we understood what name is doing, right? But we were getting name attribute in so many options here. So what happens is your data is going to store somewhere, right? So wherever your data is getting stored, there should be some label for that data. And that label is nothing but name. For example, here email, right? So for email, if you write name email, so what will happen? User's email will be stored, right? It will be collected. So it will be collected under this particular email name, right? The particular email variable. It is not variable. We should call it as label. right? So under this label, the email that user is entering, that will be stored. You can consider it, you can understand it like a variable, but it is not actually a variable. It is just a label, right, under which your value is going to store. But in case of radio button, it is doing even more, right? The name attribute must be same in all your radio inputs. Fine. Now there is one more attribute that you can use, that is value. And whenever there are multiple options to select, right? For example, in this radio buttons, we have three options and we can choose only one. For example, if we have drop down list, so again we have we have so many options, and out of which we are selecting one or two, right? So for such kind of things, you can use one more attribute, which is nothing but value attribute. Right? So what happens is, if I write value here, and in the male, I'm writing value male. For female, I'm writing value female. You can consider it as a compulsory thing, right? If you are using radio button and select option, which is nothing but to create drop down that we are going to see next, right? So for select option as well as for radio buttons, just make it a habit that it's basically mandatory to use value attribute, right? And for others, I can write value is equal to other. Okay, so what happens is, whatever option user select, if user select male, then male should be stored under gender. Okay? But the thing is, it is not this text that is getting stored. It is not this text that is getting stored. It is this value that is getting stored. Right? Because see, for other fields, for name, you get one field. Whatever data you basically get in this field, that will be stored. Right? For email, whatever you get, that will be stored. But for male, female, other, for radio button, what will be stored? What will be stored, right? So it is not this text that is going to be stored. It is the value attribute that you provide. So if user select male, so it will check what value is there under value attribute. What value is there? Value is male. So male will be stored under this name gender. If female, then female value will be stored, not this text female. If I write here something like F, so F will be stored. Female word will not be stored. F will be stored in your connection, right? I hope it makes sense, right? Now let's see the one final thing, which is select option, right? So after this, select basically used to, get some drop downs, right? So again, name. So let's say phone. Okay. ID, you can skip it. I'll introduce what ID and classes are in CSS. After select, again, let me write some BR first. Okay. Now, select has some options. Select has some options. So for example, you have iPhone, right? That can be one option. And here also, see, you need to write value. Okay. Again, the role of value attribute is same here also. I'll explain it once again, don't worry. Let's say you have phone of maybe Samsung. Let's write one more. This is for someone who is using Nokia. So let me write here. Yes. So see here, one drop down is created. Can you see in the right hand side? One drop down is created and you can select only one option, either Samsung, either iPhone or Nokia. Now, if user select Samsung, right? So it is not this text that is going to be stored. What will be stored? The value corresponding to Samsung. So what is the value? Samsung here. If I write just Sam here, then Sam will be stored. Here there will be Samsung only, right? But if you select Samsung, the value that is going to store under this name phone will be this Sam and not Samsung, right? So I hope the role of value and name attribute is clear to all of you, and all the elements that we covered under form is clear to all of you. right? Can I get some confirmation if it is clear or not? Or if you have any doubts, please feel free to ask. Yes, absolutely, Neha ma'am. Good observation. Yes, Parth. Correct, correct. You all are correct. All right, all right. Thank you all for confirmation. So let's now move ahead and let's now start our journey with CSS, right? So far what we did, we created structure, right? We created structure, but to make that structure, to add some style to that structure, we can use CSS. Right. So what exactly difference between HTML, CSS and JavaScript is, you might be already aware of, but let me cover that quickly. So HTML you can use for structure of your website, of your web page. CSS you can use it for styling, right? And JavaScript for behavior. Let's understand this with one example now. So let's say you want to create one button. Right? So the button you can create using HTML, right? You can just use button, right? So something like click me, right? So see, this button is created with click me, right? So button we created using HTML, right? But if you want to style that button, if you want to add some color, some border, right? Some padding, margin, right? So to add style to that button, to that particular structure, you can use CSS, right? And if you want to make that button interactive, if you want to add some behavior, then you can use JavaScript, right? Okay. So for example, when user clicks on button, he should get, addition of two numbers. So that is one functionality, that is one interactivity, right? One behavior. So that you can add using JavaScript, right? Now I want to ask you that, can we create a web page dynamic using JavaScript? Is JavaScript responsible to make pages dynamic? What do you think? Yes. Okay. Yes. Yes, correct. So if we just talk about the context of front end only, right? Forget about back end, forget about full stack and all, right? If we just consider front end, right? So in terms of front end, it is absolutely true that JavaScript is making our website dynamically. But if we talk on a lower level, right? If we talk in terms of full stack web development, then it is not 100% true that JavaScript is equal to dynamic. Not 100% true. If you are just considering front end, it is absolutely true that JavaScript is adding some dynamics, right? It can add some behavior, it can add some animation, some effects. That is nothing we call it as dynamic, right? That is 100% true. But maybe not today's session, maybe in next session, I'm going to explain what exactly dynamic website means, right? I'll explain you what exactly static website is, what exactly dynamic website is, right? What exactly API powered website is, right? Right now we are using client side rendering, right? We are using React.js, AngularJS. So what exactly client side rendering is, what exactly server side rendering is, right? What's the role of dynamic website there? So all things we are going to cover. Just wait for that session, right? Before starting React, I'll cover this part, right? If we get time today, then today also we can cover. Okay, fine. So let's continue. Okay, so that was about the introduction of CSS. Now, let's see. the types of CSS. Right, this is again a very basic stuff, right? So I will not spend more time on this, but I will quickly explain you. So I already created one file for types of CSS, right? So again, I will generate my boilerplate code. This is again an HTML file, right? The title I will give types of CSS. So there are basically three types of CSS. What are those? One is inline, one is internal, and one is external CSS, right? So let's cover each one by one. So let's say I have one H1, right? Now we all know what H1 is and all, right? So let's say this is H1, right? Okay, how to run this file? See, my live server is already running. Can you see this port 5500? That means the live server is already running, right? But now I changed my file. I'm not in the same HTML file. So what I can do, I can close that running live server, right? By just clicking on stop live server, and I can just open it again. Right? So now this particular file is running in the browser that I want, and inline CSS. So inline CSS simply means wherever you are writing the element, there and then only you can write the style attribute. Right? For example, you want to change background color, you can just write background color aqua. This is nothing but the inline style. See, background color is now changed to aqua. But this is not a good practice, right? This will look very messy, right? Because right now we only have one tag, but we are going to have so many tags, right? So this way no one prefers actually. Right? If there are just 2-3 tags and you want to use, you can use, otherwise don't. Right? But I'll tell you, in React, it is quite useful. In React, we are not going to write HTML, that is actually JSX, but that is the part of further discussion. But this kind of thing, is quite useful in React, right? Because there, what we can do, there our separation of concern will be on a component level, right? So for each component we'll have one file, and in the same file we can write HTML, CSS, JavaScript. Right now what approach we are following? Again, we are following the approach separation of concern. But how? HTML file different, CSS file different, JavaScript file different. So in terms of technologies, we are separating the concern. But in React, again, it follows separation of concern, but in a different way. There, what we do, we just take a part of UI and put that part of UI in one particular file. And in the same file, we write our HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. Right? But let's not go there. Let's just continue here. And that part we'll definitely see in React. Right? So this is not a good practice as of now, right? So I'll just comment it out. I don't want it. Right now, second type is internal CSS. So for internal CSS, in the head portion, you can write one style tag, right? And inside the style tag, you can style your element. For example, I have H1. This is another H1, something like this. And you want to style this. So what you can do, you can just write H1 curly braces, and you can write your key value pairs, background color aqua, and you can see this is another HTML is style. Now, what is this H1? H1 is nothing but a selector, but that is the next topic. Right now, you can just understand that we are just styling H1. Right? And what is this? This is the syntax of writing CSS. Right? So in curly braces, we write key value pairs. Sorry. Key value pairs, right? So this background color is a key and aqua is a value, right? Or you can say property value pair. So background color is property and aqua is value. You can write multiple properties. For example, color you want red, so you can write color red. You just need to separate two properties with semicolon. Same for inline CSS. If you want to write color here, you can write. You can just separate it with semicolon. Okay, so you can see the color is now red. Background color simply means it adds the background color, right? As the name is saying, and color red means whatever text that we have under H1 will be colored. Fine. So you can see the red color over here. Fine. So this is second type of CSS, which is internal CSS, right? But what is more preferred is the more preferred way is using external CSS. So to write external CSS, what we do? Let me just comment this entire part. What we can do? We can create one more file. I'll just name it types of CSS.css. Right? And whatever we wrote with internal CSS, same I'll be writing here. Background color aqua and color will be red. Sometimes using suggestions and auto completion becomes problematic, but no worries. Yes. So see, it will work the same. No, it is not working. Why? Why it is not working? We forgot one thing. What we are forgetting? We wrote the style, right? And I'll tell you the style that we wrote is 100% correct. Then why it is not getting applied? Yes. What can be the reason? Yes, we need to link the file, right? Right now, this HTML does not know that you have one separate CSS file, right? So we need to we need to attach this CSS file with this HTML. So how you can do that? You can use link attribute. You can write link rel. Rel is nothing but relationship. So our relationship will be right now style sheet because we want to link CSS file, right? There are some other options also. Sorry, my health is bit unwell today since few days actually. No worries. Okay, so there are some other options as well, right? If you want to include favicon, right? Favicon is nothing but, this icon. Can you see this PowerPoint small symbol here? That is called as favicon. Can you see this cloud bit small icon here? That is actually favicon, right? So there are some other relationships as well that you can use, but right now we want CSS. So I wrote style sheet, right? And what is the name of our file that we are going to specify in this href? So my file name is types of CSS. Now my HTML file, see, this is my HTML file and this is my CSS file. Both are in the same folder. That means I can directly write the name of the file. If it is in some other folder, I can use that particular location of that folder. Right? I can write the entire path here. Fine. Yes, you can use a relative path here. Uh, if you guys are not aware of relative path and absolute path, do let me know in the chat. I'll try to cover that as well. Okay, so let me briefly tell you what relative path is. Relative path is nothing but the path from the current location. Right. So for example, in this day1 folder, I have another folder called images, and inside that images, I have this particular CSS file. So what I should write? I should write images slash types of CSS.css. That is what the relative path is. And what is the absolute path? Absolute path is the path from root directory. For example, C colon something like program files, then users, something like this, right? I'm just typing out a random path. So this is called absolute path, right? But here you can write relative path. So no need to mention entire path. Fine. I hope that makes sense. So now that we attached, let's see if it is working or not. And yes, it is working just fine, right? So I hope types of CSS is clear to all of you, right? If you guys have any doubt, feel free to ask. Okay, I'll look your messages, your chat in between, right? So please mention all your doubts that you have. Okay, so after types of CSS, let's now discuss selectors, right? But before discussing selectors, I want to cover what ID and class is. Do you guys have any idea what class and ID is? So I'll try to explain it in a very simple manner. You just need to understand 2 points about both for ID and for class, right? So let me just write it down and then we can discuss it, right? So one class, this is the first point, one class can be applied or can be given to multiple elements. Second point, one element can have multiple classes. Let me write it for ID also, then we can understand. So one ID can be given to only one element. One ID can be given to only one element, and one element can have only one ID. Just 2 points in each you need to understand, right? So see here, one class can be given to multiple elements. Let's understand this with coding example, right? So I have one file called selectors, right? So in this selector file, let me demonstrate this. So the title will be selectors, right? And now see here, I have one h1, right? This is h1. Now class and ID are nothing but attributes, right? You might have seen this in HTML forms, right? There was one ID attribute which was getting generated, right, by VS Code, emit. So let's understand that now. So let's say you have one ID. Let's start with ID. So let's say you have one ID and main heading, something like this you are giving. So what is the use of ID? To uniquely identify any HTML element. For example, you have another h1. This is another h1. Now, if you say I want to select h1, then what does that mean? Because we have two h1s, right? So it does not make any sense. But if you say that I want h1 with ID main heading, or you can just say I want main heading, right? So it is the ID is uniquely identifying this h1, right? Now coming to the point here that one ID can be given to only one element. I cannot use this ID for any other element. For example, this paragraph, I cannot write ID main heading here. Main heading. This is not allowed. Of course, it will not going to throw any error, right? HTML does not do that. But just for good practice, we should not do this. It will work just fine. We are not going to get any kind of error or something like that. But this is not the way we work, right, with HTML. So one ID we can give only to one HTML element, right? And the second point is one element can have only one ID. That means if I give main heading here, I cannot give any other ID here. I cannot give ID2, ID3 here. That is not allowed. So again, I will repeat, one ID can be given to only one HTML element, and one HTML element can have only one ID, right? For example, the logo of your website, there will be only one logo in your website, right? So for that logo, you can give ID, right? Now, let's discuss about class. So class, one element can have multiple class. For example, class C1, let's give it some meaningful, BG red, or maybe color blue, right? So see, one element can have multiple class. And one class can be given to multiple elements. For example, for this particular paragraph also, I can give the same class, BG red. This is quite helpful because in our websites also there will be so many elements for which we are going to apply same kind of styles. So it's better to give same class to both that element and specify style only once. Otherwise, what you need to do, you need to write multiple times same styling, right? So for such kind of things, you can utilize class. Right? So see here. I'm just repeating again. One class, I'm utilizing it for multiple elements. That is possible. And one element can have multiple classes. For example, this particular H1 has two classes. Fine. So I hope this is clear. Now coming back to the topic, which is selector, right? Now, what is the use of CSS? To style element. But to style element, we should first select that element, right? Without selecting element, we cannot style any element. Make sense, right? So first I will write internal CSS for that style tag, right? Yes, ideally we should use external CSS, right? But just for tutorial purpose, I'll be using internal CSS so that you can see everything in a same file, your HTML as well as your CSS, just to avoid confusion, right? But for real work, you can consider external CSS only. Fine. So style, right? Now to style element, I need to select that element, right? So for example, I want to style H1. So I can select H1 like this. This is nothing but selector, and I can write background color aqua. Okay, let's run this file with live server. Again, I'm to a new file. So I'll just open this with live server. And you can see both my H1s are getting styled, right? So this particular way of selecting element is nothing but tag selector, or you can say element selector, because I'm selecting with element name. I just wrote H1. So whatever H1s are there in your body, in your page, all will be styled. Makes sense, right? But let's say I want to style using class name. Then what you can do, you can just write dot and then class name. So what is the class name? Class name is bgred, right? And if the class name is bgred, let's make this background color to red. So now what will happen? Whatever element has this particular bgred class, that will be selected. Let me save this. See, I have not saved this file. That is why I'm not getting any changes. Let's save this, and you can see these two elements are with red background, right? Because see, here also bgred class was applied, and here also bgred class was applied. That is why these two elements are styled, right? And if you want to select element with ID, right? So let me comment this down instead of removing it. I'll upload this on the GitHub as well so that you can refer it for revision, right? So I'm not going to remove everything. I'll just comment down everything. Now, let's say you want to apply style based on ID. You want to select element based on ID. So for ID, instead of dot, you can use hash and then ID name. So what will be our ID name? Main heading. And main heading, let's say background color, I want aquamarine. So you can see this was the main heading, and now we can see aquamarine. Right, so these are three commonly used CSS selectors. There are other two selectors as well. I think someone is on unmute. Faculties, please mute yourself. Fine. If you have anything to share or anything to ask, then you can unmute and speak up. Okay, so there are two more selectors that are commonly used, right? For example, universal selector. So universal selector, how to write? You just write asterisk, and whatever you write here, that will be applied to all the elements. All the elements, right? For example, you want margin 0, padding 0, right? This thing we generally do because browser always applies some default margin and padding to all the elements, right? I'll show you in the box model. So to avoid that, what you do, you write selector, universal selector, and you mention margin padding 0. Right? Again, I used emit. Have you noticed? I used emit. I did not write margin colon 0. No, I did not do that. What I did, I wrote M0. I wrote P0. Right? So you can use them. So this was this universal selector. right? You can also use grouping selector. That means you can write multiple selectors together. For example, h1 comma dot bg red comma dot bg dot color blue, like this. So you can separate each selector by comma, and for all of them, the whatever style you write here will be applied. Right? So that is also you can use. This is called as grouping selector. Right? This is called as grouping selector. So we discussed types of CSS, right? Inline, internal, external. These are the CSS selectors that we discussed, right? Starting with element ID, class, grouping, as well as universal selector. Now let's move ahead and let's see what we have. I hope till this point everything is clear, right? Can I get some confirmation that till this point everything is clear? How to view web page from VS Code in browser? Yeah, so Kiran ma'am, for that I am using live server extension, right? See, I'll repeat again how I used to run this file. So see, in this extension tab, there is one extension called live server. You can just install this, right? Once it is installed, you can run any of your HTML file into your browser using that particular live server, right? But make sure once it is installed, you restart your VS Code editor, right? You can close it and open it again. Then this is my HTML file, right? I want to run this in browser. So what I can do, I can just right click and I can click on open with live server. That's all you need to do. And all your changes will be updated here, just like a hot module reload, right? Everything you save it, every changes you save it, it will be reflected here, right? We are going to again use this functionality in React, right? Hot module reload, but not with live server. We'll see there.
Yes, before we go ahead, I would like to inform to all the faculty members that in the chat box, I have shared the attendance form link. So I request everyone to please mark your presence for the afternoon session. I
Yes,
want
you
to
can
inform
fill up
to,
and then we can start. We can wait for 2-3 minutes.
yes. I want to inform to all the faculty members that we have shared the attendance form link in the chat box. Please use that link and mark your presence for the afternoon session. Urvashi ma'am, again sharing the link in the chat box. Kindly check this. Okay, great. Yes, Tarini ma'am, I hope now also you are also able to see the link. In the chat box, I have shared the link again. So if anyone is not able to see, just kindly check now. You are requested to mark your presence for the afternoon session. We'll just wait for 2 to 3 minutes and then we'll continue with the technical training.
Thank you, Vidyashri ma'am, for feedback. Yes, definitely we need practice, right? So we are going to learn so many things during these 5 days, right? So please do practice whenever you get time. Okay, whenever you get time, please do practice it, and we are always there for any kind of help. If you get any kind of doubts, you can always reach out to us.
So we'll just wait for 1 more minute and then we'll continue with the technical training. If anyone is still not able to see the link or anything, then in the chat box, I have again shared the link. Please check this and mark your presence for the afternoon session. As your attendance is very important, it is one of the aspect of getting completion certificate. So please make sure that without fail, you are marking your presence in this Google form. Whenever you are marking your presence, please make sure you are writing the same mail ID which you have entered for the LMS registration, because we will be able to identify you based on your mail ID only. So make sure that you are utilizing the same mail ID, you are providing the same mail ID. Yeah, so I think we have waited for the enough time and majority of you have given the response that you have marked your presence. So I hand over the session to Jai sir. Please continue with the technical training.
Sure, ma'am. Thank you. All right. So let's move further, right? And the next thing is after CSS selector, what kind of CSS selectors we discussed? We discussed element, right? We discussed class, we discussed ID, we discussed universal and grouping. I hope my screen is shared, right? Yes, it is shared. Okay, so after that, let's now see some of the commonly used CSS properties, right? These properties are self-explanatory, right? Some of them we already used, like color, background color, and you know how to write this property, right? Key value pairs, property value pairs. So I don't think I need to show you this by writing. Instead, we can focus on other important stuff, right? This is very basic properties. Color, you can add to, add color to any font, right? Background color to get background color for any element. Font family, you can write to, specify font family, right? If you want Arial, if you want some other Helvetica or some any kind of font family, you can just use font family. Font size, font weight, if you want your font to bold, light, so you can use font weight also, right? So these are some very basic properties, right? Text align, if you want your text in the center, you can use text align center. If you want your text in the left side, you can use text align left, right. So you can use it. And line height, what is line height? Line height is nothing but the space between two lines, right? Let's say you have 10 lines of text, right? So in between each line, you want some space. So you can use line height. And for all this, you can use pixel unit. There are some other units as well, but pixel will also work, right? If you want, you can use percentages, you can use EM, REM, right? You can use it, but pixel will also work. Then you have some properties for background, right? If you want to add background image instead of background color, if you want to add background image, you can use background image. And then you can just type the path of your background image. But here, how to type path? That is a bit different thing. So let me show you. So what you can do, you can write URL and in parentheses, you can write the path. Whatever your path is, you can write here like this. right? Then background repeat. If you want your background image to repeat, you can use
Okay.
this background repeat. There are some values like X repeat, repeat X, repeat Y, no repeat, right? So you can use it. Then we
ठीक है
have some
मैम देख
layout properties, but these layout properties we are going to discuss, right? In box model. And again, also some font family and these properties we are going to use it, right? We are going to use it in this particular activity. But these are self-explanatory, so I'm not explaining it differently, separately, right? That all will be covered here in this activity. Okay, fine. So let's just move on to the next topic, which is CSS box model, right? So let me introduce CSS box model now. Just give me a moment and I'll be back with my screen. Yes, I displayed one image now. Let me share my screen again. Yes. Can you see this box model? This is how it looks. But what is this thing, right? What exactly we have in the box model? So box model contains four parts. Box model contains four parts. One is content, second is padding, third is border, and fourth is margin. Now, what is the meaning of padding, border, margin, and content? Let's see that. So for that, I have one new file called box model, and let's write some code here. So I'm just writing one div. Okay, div is nothing but one element, right? If you want to, break down your website into small parts, right? For example, your website is navigation bar. So you can write navigation bar in one div element. This is just a separator, content separator. Then if you have, some cards, so you can write each card in one div. If you have sidebar, you can write your sidebar in one div. So it is basically breaking down your website into multiple components, right? So I just have one div, right? And I'm just writing this is div, nothing else. Okay. And to this div, I'll add some style. Again, this div will be covered in detail in semantic and non-semantic element, but you got the point, right? What div is. So here I'll just write some width and height. Okay, let me give some width here. So let's say width 400 pixel, and let's get height also 400 pixel. And let's get some border here. So border 2 pixel solid black. Right. Now let's understand this border property. Right. So all the properties that I mentioned here, all we are going to use, but we are just not covering it separately to save some time. Right. So right now we are using this border property. So see here, what I am doing, border property takes three things. You can consider it like a function which takes three parameters, three arguments. It is not a function, just for example, right? So 2 pixel, this is nothing but the weight of your border width basically, right? So border width, I'm giving it 2 pixel. Then this solid is nothing but border style. So border style, I'm giving solid. You can use other value like dotted, and there are some more values, but generally we go with solid. And this is the color of border. Actually, there are three different properties. One is border width, border style, and border color. But we are just using a shorthand. And this shorthand you will always use instead of writing three separate properties, right? So border I added. Now let's see the output. So I'll just open this file with live server. And you can see this is how it looks. Yes, it was zoomed in actually. Let me get it to the actual size. So this is how it looks. But where is box model? So what I will do, I'll just right click and I will click on inspect. And here, can you see developer tools is open. Now in this developer tools, here you can see one option called, see my mouse. Here you can see the option called select an element. You can just click on that and you can select your div here. Can you see this? You can select your div. So I selected my div, and now you can see the box model is displayed for the div. See, content has 400 by 400. Remember the width and height we gave 400 by 400. So this is what that size is, right? Now, let's understand what content is. So see this, this is text, this is div. This is what the text of that div element is. So this text is nothing but the content of this div element, right? Then after that, whatever the space is there in between padding, in between your content and border, that is what the padding is. See the second component in this box model. Second component is what? Padding. But right now we don't have any space between content and border. That means zero padding. If I write padding here, you can directly change the value from here also, but this is temporary, right? So let me give 30 pixel of padding. So I will write 30 and hit enter. Have you noticed the change? Now we have space between content and border. So the space between content and border is your padding. If you refresh this, you can see again your padding is 0. These changes are not permanent. If you want permanent changes, you can write here in your VS Code. So padding, I will write 30 pixel. And if you write padding 30 pixels, that means from all side. See here, observe this box model carefully. From all four sides, now we have 30 pixel of space. Can you see? From all four sides. That is top, bottom, left, and right. From all side, we have 30 pixel of space. If I just want in top, I can write padding top, I can write padding bottom, and same is for margin also. And same for border also. Border also, if you want to give border only on the top, you can write like this. Okay, I hope you got the idea of padding is, what padding is. Right? After that, we have border. So when you hover over these particular components, that is also reflected in the UI. See, content is selected, this padding is selected. See, green background, green color padding, then border. And right now we don't have margin. Margin is nothing but the space outside of the border, right? So if I give margin also, if I give margin of 30 pixel, so what will happen? From all four side, we have 30 pixel of space, right? From right hand side, see, before I close this, you can see 30 pixel margin is added all four sides. Can you see this in the box model? Okay, let me close this. And here 30 pixel is added, but from right side and bottom side, you won't be able to observe that because we don't have content, right? But from top and left, you can see this. So if I increase it to maybe 100 pixel, then clearly you will be able to see. See, now we have add of 100 pixel from all four sides, right? So margin is nothing but space outside of the border. To summarize, content is nothing but the content of your element is, right? It can be simply text, it can be any other HTML elements as well. Fine. Second is padding. Padding is nothing but the space between content and border, right? Then border, you can just give edges or border to any element, right? That is nothing but the border is. And finally, margin is what? The space outside of the border. That is what the margin is. Right? So I hope this box model make sense. Right? Now, as I already explained that you can write margin bottom, margin top like that also, right? But what happened if I write two values here? If I write margin 100 pixel and 50 pixel, what do you think what will happen? Any idea? What will happen if I write like this? Top and bottom. Okay. Okay, I'm sharing the attendance once again for you. Okay, so the answer is this 100 pixel will be applied to top and bottom, and this 50 pixel will be applied to left and right. Understood? This will be for top bottom both. From top and bottom both 100 pixel margin will be there, and from left and right 50 pixel margin will be there. Okay, what if I write three values? Now what will happen? What do you think? 50 bottom. Okay. Okay, I'll tell you what happens. 100 will be for top, 70 will be for bottom, and 50 will be for left and right. 100 will be for top, 50 will be for left, right, and 70 will be for bottom. Achha, what if I write four values? Then we'll move clockwise. 100 for top, 50 for right, 70 for bottom, and 60 for left. I will repeat again. Let's say we have one value. So top, right, bottom, left for all four same value 100 pixel. If we have two values, then first value will be for top, bottom, second value will be for left and right. If we have three values, first will be for top, second will be for left, right, and third will be for bottom. And if we have four values, then top, right, bottom, and left. I hope it is clear. Fine. So after box model, we have very important thing of CSS positioning and CSS flexbox. But right now it is 2:55, so we are not able to complete entire CSS positioning. So let's do one thing. Let's just understand what layout is, right? And tomorrow we'll start with CSS positioning, right? So let's understand very interesting thing about CSS. Okay, now pay attention very carefully. Now I'm going to show you some stuff. You will find it magical. Just believe me and just see here, right? See, in CSS, what we generally believe, that CSS is all about properties. This is what we generally believe, right? The CSS is all about properties. But again, that is not 100% true. That is not 100% true. I will tell you why. Have you heard of one property called Z index? How many of you know about this property, Z index? How many of you know about Z index property? Why we use Z index? Any idea? We'll just extend the session by 5-7 minutes. Okay, so Z index property basically decide the stacking order of element. For example, there are multiple elements which are overlapping. So which element will come on top? That is going to decide by Z index property. Clear? Now, how many of you have heard that we can use Z index property only with positioning? If position is relative, if position is absolute. See, even if you don't know position absolute relative as of now, don't worry, we are going to cover that tomorrow. But just for those who already know these things, right? Who already have some basic idea. So have you heard this thing that we can use Z index property only on positioned element having position relative absolute? How many of you have heard this? Yes. All right. Thank you for response. So yes, we generally have that idea that we can use the index, but for that, for Z index to work, we need our element having position relative absolute or something like that, right? But that is also not true. That is true actually, but not only for positioning elements, positioned element, right? Now let me clear out this confusion. Okay, so the main concern was CSS is not all about properties. It is more about layout modes. It is more about layout modes, or I would say layout algorithms, or I would say layout algorithms. It is actually layout mode only, official name is, but I just use layout algorithms because it helps understanding the concept better, right? So what layout algorithm is? The way you structure your element, the way your elements are laid out. Okay, so we all have heard, maybe, right, most of us, about Flexbox. So what is Flexbox? I'll clear that Z index confusion. Just wait for a minute. So most of us have heard about Flexbox, even if we don't know what Flexbox and what it does, but we know that there is something called as Flexbox, right? We might also have heard about Grid, right? We might also have heard about Float and Clear, Float and Clear. So what are these? What are these? These are nothing but layout algorithms because they decide how your elements will get laid out. How your elements get laid out. Right? Now coming to Z index. Again, yes, positioning, right? Position relative absolute. That is also that is also one of the layout algorithm. Right? Now coming to Z index, right? So Z index, you cannot just use in the positioning. You can also use it in the flexbox. But without flexbox or without positioning or without some of the layout algorithm, you cannot use it. For example, right now we are not using any layout algorithm, right? Whatever the default layout is, we are just using it. Now, right now, if you try to use Z index property, that is not going to work. Now answer me one question, that if CSS is all about properties, then why Z index is not working right now and why we need to make it flexbox or position to make it working? If it is all about properties, it should work anyway and anywhere. But why it is not working? That is one reason I'm saying CSS is not about properties, is not only about properties. Right? Now, there will be some default layout, right? If you are not using flexbox, grid, or these things, definitely there will be some default layout, and that default layout is called as flow layout. Have you heard about block and inline? So by default, your element will be either block or inline. Block means it will take 100% of the width of your screen, and inline means whatever the size of the content is, only that much width it will take. Now, this is called as flow layout, and this is the default layout, right? So Z index will not work in flow layout. If I take an example of flow layout, it was the older layout, right? We are still using Microsoft Word, right? So Microsoft Word is designed on flow layout. It is designed on flow layout. See, if you write any links or images, that will be inline in nature. But if you write paragraph and if you write some headings, that will be block in nature, right? That is one real life example of flow layout. Okay, so the point is Z index does not work in flow layout, right? So again, I will repeat that it is not about properties only. If it is all about properties, it should work in flow layout. Now, that is one point, that layout algorithm decide whether it should apply Z index property or any property in that particular algorithm or not. whether to include a particular property in the algorithm or in the layout mode or not. It is up to the layout algorithm. Right? So this is one point, whether to include it or not. Now, second point, some properties work differently in different layout algorithm. Again, I'm proving the same point that CSS is not all about properties. There are some properties which behave differently in different layout algorithm. For example, width property. I will say, sir, width is same for, it should be same for all layout, right? But no, that is not true. Width in flow layout work differently, and in Flexbox layout work differently. If you are not believing, let me show you. Just I'll take 3-4 more minutes. So let me create one new file here, index.html. I'll quickly show you. I'm going to use Flexbox for now, but don't worry, Flexbox is not the point. The point is that width is working differently. That I want to show you. So quickly, I'll create one div dot flex container. No need to understand the code. Okay, no need to understand the code right now. The point is whole different. Fine. And I will have one more div with class item. Okay. Now for style, sorry. See what I will do for this item. I will apply some height. Let's say 50 pixel and some background color. Let's say aqua. Right. Now let me quickly show the output of this. Okay, so let's add some margin bottom so that we get different. Yes, so this is our first div. This is our second div. See, I'm styling item class. So see, one item div is inside this particular flex container and one item div is separate. So what I will do, I will make this item, this second item with, I'll basically give it a layout of Flexbox, right? So what I will do, I'll just style this flex container. And here I'll change the layout mode to flex. No need to understand flex now, right? It's the topic of tomorrow. But the thing is, this item is in flow layout and this item is in Flexbox layout. Understood this much only? Only this much you need to understand right now, that this first div item is in flow layout and this second div item is in Flexbox layout. Now see, I'm going to apply the width property. For example, width 2500 pixel. For example, width is 2500 pixel. Now let's see the magic. Let's see the magic. See, for both the divs, what is the width? 2500 pixel. But now see here. For the first div, it is actually 2500, but for second div, it is not. See, if CSS is all about properties, why this different behavior? Why width is hard rule in case of flow layout, and why it is not a hard rule in case of Flexbox? In case of Flexbox, it is just a suggestion. It is just a suggestion. According to the better fit, it will decide the size. But in case of flow layout, it is a hard rule and not suggestion. See, for both div, the width is 2500 pixel, but only for first div it is getting 2500 pixel. For second div it is not. Right? So I hope you got the idea that it is up to the layout algorithm. First point, again, first point, it is up to the layout algorithm whether to include any property or not. Second thing, again, it is up to the layout algorithm that how it want to add behavior of particular element, particular property, right? Example is Z index was working in a Flexbox in a position, but not in a flow. Then second example, width both Flow and Flexbox, both are applying width, right? Both are accepting width property, but differently. Behavior is different. Right? So the whole point is, again, CSS is not 100% about properties. It is more about layout algorithms. Right? I hope it makes sense and you understood this. Yes. If it is clear, can I get some responses in the chat or some reaction? Or if you have any doubts, you can ask. Clear, everyone? Does that make sense? Basically, we changed our mental model of CSS, right? So many people does not know these things. So now we just changed our mindset of thinking about CSS. Okay, thank you all for your responses. So yes, yes, sure, Anuradha ma'am. We are going to share recording, right? So tomorrow, once your LMS credentials are created, from your LMS, you can find the recordings of all the sessions. Right? So tomorrow you will get access of recordings. Yeah, you can always go through the recording. Okay, fine. So it's 3:10. So let's keep it up to this point, right? Okay, so I think we are good to conclude the session, right? Vidhi ma'am, you want to add anything?
No, that's it. I think faculties have understood the concepts of today's session, and I think we can good to conclude with the things. So today we discussed regarding the program details, right? That what is the program structure, what is important. Hope everyone has completed the registration on the LMS part, right? So tomorrow's session, in the morning part, we will complete the technical part, the technical training, the remaining front end part, right? And then in the afternoon session, I will demonstrate the LMS, that how you can access your LMS account, whose LMS account are created, who will be considered as a part of this FDP, right? And how you can access it. All those details we will discuss in tomorrow's session. So thank you, everyone.